Have you ever heard about Apartment 14? This story is said to be true, or at least that's what the people who experienced it swear. Let me tell you everything, but be warned, it's not for the faint of heart. In 1995, there was a young man named Hiroshi Takahashi. He was an ordinary university student, quiet and humble. Because of his financial situation, Hiroshi was desperate to find a cheap place to live near campus. After searching for some time, he came across a small apartment in an old building on the outskirts of Tokyo. It was Apartment 14. The rent was surprisingly cheap, almost suspiciously so, but Hiroshi didn't think much of it. To him, it seemed like the perfect deal. The first night in the apartment was uneventful. It was small but cozy, with old furniture and a large mirror mounted on the wall in the living room. But as Hiroshi settled in, he began to feel off. Late at night, he thought he heard faint whispers, like soft breathing, from the corners of the room. At first, he brushed it off, thinking it was his imagination or just the creaks of an old building. As the days went by, the strange occurrences became more frequent. Some nights, Hiroshi heard the sound of dripping water, though every faucet in the apartment was tightly shut. But the real terror began a week later. While studying late one evening, Hiroshi started to feel uneasy about the mirror in the living room. He couldn't explain it, but it felt like it was watching him. One night, as he passed by it, he noticed something chilling. His reflection didn't move in sync with him. There was a delay, as if the person in the mirror wasn't him, but something else entirely. Terrified, Hiroshi decided to ask the neighbors about the apartment. One elderly man immediately grew tense when Hiroshi mentioned Apartment 14. "You're staying there?" the man asked, almost in disbelief. When Hiroshi nodded, the neighbor hesitated before explaining that no one stayed in that apartment for long. Tenants either left abruptly or simply disappeared. The neighbor mentioned a gruesome incident that had taken place years ago. A woman had been murdered there by her boyfriend. According to the story, the boyfriend had attacked her in a fit of rage, killing her in the apartment. But what made the crime even more horrifying was what he did afterward. He dismembered her body and buried the pieces in various places around the apartment, inside the walls under the floorboards. It was said that her restless spirit never left. Despite his fear, Hiroshi tried to rationalize the situation. He convinced himself to stay, but he resolved to move out as soon as possible. Unfortunately, he had to spend one final night in the apartment before completing his move-out paperwork. That night would become the worst of his life. Around midnight, Hiroshi heard heavy, deliberate footsteps in the living room. They were slow, as if someone or something was pacing. Gathering his courage, he stepped into the room, but it was empty. Confused and frightened, he returned to his bed. A little later, he heard the front door slam open with a loud bang. He rushed to check, but the door was still locked and untouched. Shaking, Hiroshi returned to his bedroom, but what happened next froze him in terror. As he lay in bed, he felt the mattress sink, as though someone had sat down at the edge of the bed. Slowly, he turned his head and saw her. Sitting there was a pale woman, her hair wet and matted against her face, her skin streaked with blood. Her hollow eyes stared straight at him as she whispered in a faint, broken voice, "Give me back my body." Hiroshi couldn't move. He couldn't scream. He just lay there, paralyzed with fear, as her empty eyes bore into him. After what felt like an eternity, the figure vanished, but the air in the room remained heavy, suffocating. At dawn, Hiroshi packed up everything he owned and fled the apartment. He didn't look back. When workers came to clear out the remaining furniture, they found something disturbing. The large mirror in the living room was shattered, and the walls were covered in red, writing that read, "I will not leave." The building was demolished a few years later because of its bad reputation. But to this day, locals claim to hear faint whispers and soft cries late at night where the building once stood. Some say her spirit is still there, waiting for justice or perhaps for revenge.
Join our family and be part of our adventures. Just click the subscribe button now.